some teams that may, in fact, actually be the most improved offensive units in the NFL in 2024. For fantasy, that means that you could have potential for massive breakouts, some big draft day values, players that you could just see putting up a ton of fantasy points that they maybe haven't done in the past. And it only felt right to start this episode with the team that really disappointed everyone last year. There's kind of like a father-son mentality right now between fantasy owners and the team here, the Atlanta Falcons. This was rough, man. We weren't mad at them. We were just disappointed. That's kind of like the feeling that we had going on. They get a new coaching staff. Raheem Morris comes in as the head coach. Zach Robinson comes in as the offensive coordinator. You bring in Kirk Cousins at quarterback. You get a couple of other ancillary pieces at wide receiver, Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore. We have seen in the past, Kirk Cousins has been able to lead a very good offense. He's been able to support some phenomenal fantasy assets, guys like Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Dalvin Cook, players that I think in their own right are already extremely talented. So the question here isn't necessarily can Kirk Cousins prop up these players for the Falcons, but is the trio that we're looking at on Atlanta, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, are they good enough to be those fantasy league winners and kind of pick up those same mantles that players like Justin Jefferson, Hawkinson, Cook have done in the past? Are they the league winners that so many of us are making them out to be?
I think Bijan is. I think Bijan's spectacular. He's the nearest thing since Saquon. Like he looks a lot like young Saquon to me. He's my 2 overall. If you had him 3, that's fine too. I think running back, the best running backs present so much value that even in full PPRs, I'm still grabbing running backs at the very top. I did a big long, I write this almanac all summer and it's all this data in my head. And whenever I wrote this big long Rachaad White profile about how Rachaad White's percentage of backfield in games that he was healthy was so insanely large relative to the rest of the league, and pointing out that way more than 3/4 of the teams don't give 3/4 of the carries to one guy. It's just, that's not the world anymore. And so, no, is Bijan going to be free of Tyler Algier? Definitely not. But that's just the world we live in. There's one guy, there's McCaffrey, and that's kind of it. And we'll see how that goes because he's been hurt in the past. So I'm not going to fret about Algier. I think Bijan is a league winner. I would take him high. I think the price on Kyle Pitts, when all gets said and done, will wind up coming down to a reasonable. I think when people start to be faced with that moment where you have to push the button on the draft room and say, "Here we go,
fourth year in a row."
Yeah, I think people are going to shy away, and he's going to become the tight end 8. And if he's the tight end 4, then I don't want him. But if he's the tight end 8 and he falls to me because I'm going to wait on tight end, I'm okay with that. Drake London feels to me the one in between the two, and I'm interested to hear what you guys think about London. I don't think he's all that fast. I don't think he's all that elusive. I think he's got really great hands, and he can do kind of a budget Mike Evans thing that he has never yet been asked to do because he didn't have the quarterback for it. And I have Drake London as a top 20 receiver for sure. I'm not going to reach and say he needs to be top 10, but if the dude is ranking in the top 20, it kind of the very top of that very giant tier of wide receiver 3 in the infinite sadness, as I like to call it, just the all the guys that are kind of the same. But I feel like London deserves to be higher than, at least at the top of that group. Then that feels like I'm going to get him some. We'll find out. What do you think, Dave?
So Drake London, I'm a little conflicted on because I agree with you. And I hear a lot of people say well, look at what Justin Jefferson did with Kirk Cousins. Yeah. And I think that's just really tough to say that. Yeah, they're not the same guy. Justin Jefferson, what he can do after the catch, his ability to separate, Drake London is better at contested catches. And I think that I don't know if there's anything that he's better at than Justin Jefferson, but he can move the chains. He can make contested catches. He can get up above defenders, and that's all great to see. But I think that's kind of where I'm at with Drake London. And again, I don't want to keep spoiling all these ADP surprises.
You can.
For you.
It's
You'll
okay.
find out.
It's fine.
Drake London's going at the top of round 2 right now. And when I see that, what I see is that all of the upside is being accounted for. Drafters are expecting him to break out. And there's still tremendous downside there because at the end of the day, this is a guy who's never caught for 1,000 yards. And of course, there have been other factors, whether it's coaching, quarterback, you can draw the excuses all you want, but I think that's kind of, I think the Mike Evans comp that you make is perfect. And Mike Evans has had a handful of years where he's broken out and been a wide receiver one, but he's always kind of that high end wide receiver two. And that's what I see with Drake London. So I'm okay drafting him because I think he does take a step forward with Kirk Cousins. I think Zach Robinson, the new offensive coordinator there, is going to up the pass rate a little bit, up the pace of play a little bit. But I don't know if he's got this top 3, top 5 upside that drafters are expecting out of him. I just don't know if he's that type of player. I find myself preferring Kyle Pitts, who's going much, much later in drafts. I think what we saw last year wasn't really the true Kyle Pitts coming off of that knee surgery. He didn't really look like himself. But I prefer Kyle Pitts, knowing that I can get him significantly later at that more valuable tight end position than I do paying up for Drake London, who I think kind of best case scenario is, maybe he's a top 10, top 15 guy, but I don't know if he's got the skill to get above that level.
Yeah, and I think that becomes like a philosophy thing. It's are you, when you draft a player, like you said, Dave, top 15, are you drafting them for the floor, or are you drafting them for the ceiling? And that's kind of what we talked about last week, is what does the drafter become more comfortable with? I think that so many people are comfortable drafting Drake London where he is because of that floor, because of the perceived target volume. And I think that's something that we will see. I think we will continue to see plenty of target volume for him in that offense. And you guys mentioned sort of a Mike Evans-esque usage for him. And I almost sort of look at the offense that the Rams were running, and I see a way that Drake London can absolutely be used the same way that Puka Nacua was, a lot more on these crossing routes and a lot of stuff that can get him open a bit more, because he's not a guy that he's not a guy that just wins on routes a ton and creates a lot of separation. However, don't make that to believe that he's not a good route runner. He can still run routes well, and those crossing routes allow him for some more separation. He can actually get that ever elusive yards after catch that he's never really had in his career. So I think with him being a guy that can play outside, move inside, still be kind of aggressive with what he does in the field, despite being a little bit slender, I think we can see a little bit of that Puka Nacua upside. But even when we look at that, how high is that ceiling? Is that wide receiver 8 at best? And then you're drafting him at like wide receiver 10 right now. I don't know that it ends up being a great return on value. So, I mean, it makes a ton of sense to want to draft him a little bit lower. Dave, I don't know. Is that kind of where you're at? I feel like we've sort of not soured, but we've cooled down on Drake London.
Yeah, I mean, he's a wide receiver too for me. And I think Chris said it best. Like, he's a tier above the, what did you say? The wide receiver 3 in Infinite Sadness is what you label it, Chris?
Correct.
Yeah, I think he deserves to be above those guys. But the other thing, and again, I don't want to get like too into the weeds talking about the depth chart and talking about all this here, but like there is more target competition this year as well. Like that's kind of been the thing with Drake London for the last 2 years since he's been in the league. He's been the only wide receiver in Atlanta. Now they brought in Darnell Mooney, who's no slouch, and maybe Rondale Moore gets going a little bit. So I think that would be the concern. Kyle Pitts, a year removed from the knee surgery. Darnell Mooney there now. The thing that has made London so alluring, especially to the data guys over the last couple of years, is that he's pulling this elite target share, an elite air yard share, and elite targets per route run and all of that. But we know that the pie is going to grow a little bit this year, but that slice of his pie could shrink. So I think the positives and negatives kind of outweigh each other a little bit. I'd be happy taking Drake London if he was going in the 3rd round, but unfortunately he's not falling there. So Drake London is a guy that I'm kind of okay passing on considering where he's getting drafted.
But maybe it'll change. Maybe ADP will change when
Hopefully.
Actual humans are drafting.
Hopefully it'll change.
We always forget there is that intangible that people just show up to their drafts and they go, "Oh God, I hate this guy from last year. He burned me so much." ADP changes so much. We get affected with the best ball in Dynasty.
Yeah, it's all best ball and Dynasty stuff right now. So it's like we have 1/100th, that we have 1% of the data that's going to make up ADP.
And I think what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to plug in and they're going to say, wait, Drake London, this guy who has been like an 800-yard receiver, he's going here. Like, you're telling me I can get Mike Evans, who is a lock for 1,000 yards every year, Devontae Adams, who's a wide receiver, won everything. And those guys who are going behind Drake London right now, I think could easily jump ahead of him as more drafters start to plug in.
Dave, did I just hear you mention some olds on the podcast?
Hey, people love the olds.
I love the olds. I love the olds.
All right, before we move on here and keep talking more about the olds, I want to remind you guys, we have plenty of ways for you to enjoy the show, whether it's on the podcast feed on Apple or Spotify, where, as always, it'd be so kind of you to leave a review. And then here on the YouTube channel, okay, make sure if you're not subscribed, it's youtube.com/@footballguysfantasy. Like and subscribe to this episode. And what we do here, right, is our little strategy here. It's called marketing. The videos come out the day before here on YouTube. The audio comes out the next day. So make sure you're subscribed to YouTube. You'll catch the episode before all the rest of your league mates and your friends do. But then over on the podcast, we got a little extra 15 minutes or so of bonus content that happens at the beginning of the episode. So you'll want to check out both. And Dave, we've got ourselves another giveaway, except this time, instead of the Scott Fish Bowl, we're actually giving away a spot to our own listener league for the podcast. And this is exclusive to our YouTube subscribers. It's one spot in the show's listener league. And we're going to be doing this over the next, let's call it 2 weeks or so. We're going to take our time with this one. But to be entered to be in this, I have something brand new, Dave. Are you ready for this? It's going to be really fun. The viewers have to leave a comment below with the secret phrase, Arthur Smith is a good coach. All right. If you leave that comment, Arthur Smith is a good coach, you will be entered to be in the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show Listener League. All right. Let's move on. I want to talk about our next team here that looks like they could really take another jump. The Arizona Cardinals, they could have a full season of Kyler Murray being healthy, being out there and playing. I think so much has been kind of memified. I keep using that word with Kyler Murray when it comes to his, Call of Duty shenanigans and is he a good quarterback or not? Well, I think we're going to find out. I think we're finally going to find out if he can really run an NFL offense. The running back room, James Conner and Trey Benson, that's a name that was mentioned earlier, feels like there could be a really good value there. And I think the big names have been the pass catchers for this offense, whether it's Marvin Harrison Jr. or Trey McBride. Both those guys have been mentioned a lot. Their ADPs are quite high. I won't spoil that for you, Chris. But Marvin Harrison, Dave, in the meantime, can you look up where Trey McBride is getting drafted? That's a fun one. I love Trey McBride. But right now, Chris, Marvin Harrison, he's being looked at as a top 12 wide receiver in many early rankings, in many early offseason drafts. We talked about this a little bit, but just to put an actual number on it, I noticed you have him quite a bit lower. You've got him around wide receiver 25 in your PPR rankings. I think many people would clutch their pearls at that. And I can't wait to hear why you have him there. I know we kind of talked a little bit like theory wise, but is this based on his talent that maybe he's not quite that good to be a top 12 wide receiver? Or is it just simply he's a rookie, he's on a new team, and we're not sure what's going to happen here with Kyler and the Cardinals?
My assessment of rookies in general is that we think we know what they are and we're always wrong. We don't know. It's very, very hard. And the adjustment period into the NFL is very, very hard. You're going to tell me, it's a shock to me to hear, because I don't pay attention to ADP this time of year. I just don't. I don't think it's useful. I don't think it's real. And I don't think it helps the analysis, because now all we're doing is reacting against some market that really isn't even a market yet. It's like 5 people are saying what they would pay for a loaf of bread, and we're pricing our bread based on those 5 people. We don't really know who they are.
Dave is people. Dave is people right now.
Dave is people. He loves his bread. It's just all about the carbs, Dave is. And so, you tell me that Marvin Harrison's going at the end of the first round. That's just insane. It's so easy to fade. It's nothing against him. It's the same argument why I faded Bijan Robinson last year. It's the same reason I faded Jahmyr Gibbs last year. Same reason that I faded Clyde Edwards-Helaire his year, like Najee Harris his year. There's just too much hype around players who will probably turn out to be good, but will probably not be their very best selves the second they walk in the room in the NFL. So Marvin Harrison's just easy. Just stay away.
Oh, Dave, rookie mistake. You're on mute, my pal.
So the question I have
about
first
week at Football Guys.
One to merit. The question I have about the Cardinals, and I want to know where your head is at on this, Chris, because I think Kyler Murray is a very underrated passer. And I think that Kyler Murray can support a really good passing attack. And I think there's kind of, like Alfredo joked about, there's all these memes about him being short and him being a video gamer. But when I watch him play, I think that he is just a very good quarterback. And I think that what he does with his legs kind of overshadows the thrower that he is as well. So I think that just looking at the situation he's in right now, I think Trey McBride is much better suited as the number 2 pass option. Last year he was kind of forced to be the number 1, and he did well in that role, but I think he's much better suited when he can kind of play as the secondary option. I think Zay Jones being there as well is a great veteran presence that's going to help make everybody better as well. So the person that I'm most excited about in the Cardinals this year, it's not Marvin Harrison, it's not Trey McBride, it's not Zay Jones or Greg George or James Conner or Trey Benson. It's Kyler Murray, the guy who is going to be facilitating this offense. We know that he's still young enough that he's going to be able to run around a lot, but I think that he's got the arm to support all of these talented pass catchers around him as well. What do you think about Kyler Murray as a passer? Do you think he's got it? Because I know it's a very polarizing discussion regarding Kyler.
Where do you have him? I have him QB 13. Do you have him in that neighborhood? Do you have him higher?
He is I'm above consensus on him, but he's my QB5 because he's a guy that I can still see rushing for 6, 7, 800 yards.
Do we have a point disparity here in the settings? 6 point,
Nah.
4 point per passing touch, just in general.
It's all the same.
Yeah, for me,
quarterbacks,
it's the rushing upside gives him such a high ceiling. And if you look, I mean, the worst year he's ever had on a per game basis was QB9 last year. The year coming off of the ACL, he was still the per game QB9.
Yeah.
But we've seen multiple finishes inside the top 5. So that's why I'm very much so betting on the upside that he could rush for 600 to 800 yards and then also still throw for 4,000 plus with this group of pass catchers. That's kind of what I'm expecting from Kyler this year.
Yeah, so I do tend to value the cheat code, the running cheat code for quarterbacks a little lower than a lot of folks do, because when it happens, it's amazing, but the ride can be terrible, right? Because there are usually some weeks with Jalen Hurts where he doesn't score a 1-yard touchdown, or 1 week with Kyler Murray. So I need both, in other words. And so I do tend to be like a half a notch lower on the rushing quarterbacks in general. And I will definitely acknowledge that a Kyler Murray season in which he hits could look like a league winner, as opposed to the Justin Herbert season that hits could be really, really good, but maybe not quite like the same high ceiling. So I see where you're coming from, but yeah, no, obviously I'm not as sold on Murray as a thrower. His arm is fine. I don't know that I think he sees it very well. I'm, the same thing.
Is that another short joke, or are you just saying he can't see over the offensive line?
No, it's a Justin Fields joke. It's a Justin Fields joke. It's one that you're very familiar with as a Bears fan.
Yes.
It's, I'm not sure that, like if he knows who to lock in on and that guy wins, I trust Kyler Murray to make the throw and get it there. He has plenty of wing despite being smaller, and he can extend plays and get those guys open. But when it's a harder read and a covered receiver, I do have a lot of questions. I think the Cardinals have a lot of questions. We're not a year away from a lot of Cardinal fans wishing that Kyler would just stay away. Just stay away, buddy. We'll trade you. We'll be the ones to take the quarterback 1 overall, and we can start fresh the way the Bears have started fresh. So yes, is there a world where Kyler Murray winds up as a top 5 fantasy QB this year? There is. I think there's an equal world, maybe even a bigger world, where we get to the end of the year and the Cardinals haven't won anything and they're looking to move on.
That's a good point. And I think the thing for me that I'm holding on to some hope with Kyler Murray here is that obviously his best years came when he was playing with Larry Fitzgerald and DeAndre Hopkins. And if Marvin Harrison is the guy that we expect him to be, this generational prospect, and he could immediately step on the field, I'm okay drafting Marvin Harrison because of the potential upside, but really, like I said, it's more the excitement about what he can do for Kyler Murray for me, knowing that Kyler Murray can finally have that true wide receiver 1 again, and he doesn't need to make Trey McBride or Greg Dortch his wide receiver 1. He kind of has that guy that he can lean on. If he can't get immediately open, then he's got the legs, or he can extend plays and hit some of the secondary and tertiary options. I'm maybe a little bit overexcited for Kyler Murray, but that's kind of what I wanted to ask. And I think that's what it comes down to with the Cardinals is like, if you have faith in Kyler Murray, then you're probably buying into the rest of the pieces here. But if you have any question marks about Kyler Murray, then you're probably really confused by all of these ADPs.
I mean, I'm too dumb to know the ADPs, first of all, but also, I'm high on, in my own head, I'm high on James Conner, because I recognize that, I have 20 in standard and right around there. He's not a gifted pass catcher. I remember the days where he caught a lot of balls and people said, wow, what a receiver. Like, he's just a dump off guy. But if we get to the right price, I recognize with James Conner that there's going to be a month of the year where I'm not going to have him. And it's going to be annoying, but that feels usually baked into his price. And hopefully I draft well enough that my bench can withstand his absences, or maybe I even handcuff him to Benson. But when he's in there, man, that dude's been really good for years and was really good in a hopeless situation with Josh Dobbs as quarterback last year. If I feel like I'm extending anywhere, it's maybe James Conner at 20.
And I'm somebody who I like to look at the film and the numbers. And when I was doing my kind of analytical deep dive at the end of the season, what really jumped out to me and surprised me is that James Conner had his most efficient year ever last year. Like ability to generate yards after contact, ability to break tackles, his breakaway run rate, like all of those exciting metrics for running backs. James Conner at age 29 just had arguably his most efficient season. The touchdowns weren't there, so the fantasy points weren't there. He's had better years earlier in Pittsburgh, but his efficiency profile right now at 29 is better than it's ever been, which is crazy to see for an aging running back.
He scored 9 touchdowns, didn't he?
Yeah, and I think he had double digits one year in Pittsburgh. So this was his second best year on a fantasy scoring basis, but his most efficient year as a rusher.
I like it. I mean, he finished RB15 last year. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm looking at his final 5 weeks last year. James Conner, absolutely nuts. Running back 5, running back 11, running back 5, running back 3, running back 1.
Mm-hmm.
That's with Kyler back in the lineup. I think the only argument
he's old because he could be good if he was just a few years younger.
you know what's so it always takes me out of it is when we call a guy like this old and he's 29 and you and I are sitting here just vastly older than him, and you're sending me screenshots of your morning
players.
runs.
We'd have been taken out behind the barn by now.
Yeah. I think the fear comes from people seeing Trey Benson there and thinking, okay, when is he finally going to get the hook and get pulled off stage, James Conner, and Trey Benson goes in. I think it's just a lot of people assuming he's going to get hurt. Right. Yeah. And it's we can't figure that out. And if it is going to happen in week 13 or something like that, well, guess what? You got 13 really good weeks of James Conner, and it got you all those wins. But by the time you get to that point in your season, your roster has changed so much from the players you've picked up off waivers. I kind of go back to it is you're not going to win your league from your draft. And I know everyone says that, but you can just go ahead and get some very good starters that are going to help you throughout that early portion of your season. And then your roster should be getting better. All right, guys. Next team on here that they had a massive overhaul of their roster. They also have a short quarterback, the Carolina Panthers. They bring in new head coach Dave Canales, who turned around the Bucs offense, is mentioned as turning around the Seahawks offense in Geno Smith's career. They have offensive coordinator Brad Idzik there. So, like I mentioned, they've got Bryce Young at quarterback. Jonathan Brooks is the rookie running back drafted out of Texas for them. Wide receiver, they had Diontae Johnson and Xavier Legette to a room that was basically just Adam Thielen going out there and catching 8-yard slants and falling down. And then at tight end,
Alfredo. When Chris and I talked about Adam Thielen last year, Chris, I don't know if you remember, but it's ingrained in my memory. You said the rotted out husk of Adam Thielen is how we talked about Adam Thielen on your show last year during the season. And I think that's the best way to talk about Adam Thielen. Right now.
I think Adam Thielen ended up being one of our more contentious episodes, Dave, where we were doing our wide receiver rankings. Mm-hmm. And okay, so basically, this team has improved. Yeah, we think they've improved. I don't think it would be hyperbole to say that this is a make or break season for Bryce Young. If we don't see significant improvement from Bryce Young here in his second season, does angry Panthers owner David Tepper just pull the plug on everything and start to make sweeping changes across the board? What happens? I don't know. He's like an angry kid with an old Nintendo that's not working right. But we saw Bryce Young at least give us something last year where he could support Adam Thielen as a viable PPR fantasy option for the first half of the season. Can we expect anyone from this offense to be not just a viable fantasy starter, but a good fantasy starter? I'm specifically looking at Diontae Johnson. I'm asking for a friend. I'm the friend.
I mean, I love Diontae Johnson. If we want to make the argument that the offense is going to stay the same as it was last year, and the only thing that's going to work is the pass that has to be thrown within 2 seconds of the snap, then that would be really good for Diontae Johnson, because everything Adam Thielen did to the rotted out husk of Adam Thielen did to make that work. Diontae Johnson's going to do better because he doesn't need to just run a slant. Like, he can go run a little pivot route. Like, he can, he'll be open right away in a way that Adam Thielen, in a variety of ways that Adam Thielen can't. But, they're certainly going to try to do something different than last year. They've invested in the interior of the offensive line. They're going to try to block a little better, and Bryce Young was probably in an unwinnable situation just in terms of his line. It was very bad. And I don't know if I even agree with the notion that this is a make or break year for Bryce Young. Probably one after this one because they have the rookie contract, and he's essentially got 5 years guaranteed, but they don't have to ever guarantee that fifth one. But it's hard for me to imagine that they would be completely out on Bryce Young. They might sign someone, but completely out on Bryce Young after this year. I'm doing a lot of tap dancing. If this is an episode about offensive environments we're excited about, I'm going to admit I'm surprised to hear Carolina on the list because I'm not excited about it. And I would say that I want Diontae at the right price, and that that might be it. I can't see a world where I'm excited about Jonathan Brooks just because I'm not. We'll find out what the condition of his knee is. Like hook him, UT, love it. But I think he was a good prospect and will be a good player, but it's a hard year to want to invest in him like in any meaningful way. And I don't really think Chuba Hubbard's anything special. And, I guess all of this is to say it's probably Diontae or nothing. And I would be exceptionally surprised if whatever we consider to be the market in August gets really like hot and ramped up for Panthers.
So first of all, I don't think anybody's getting excited about the Panthers, and I think that's
Right.
why I like them. Like we talked about in the beginning of the show,
That's
on
right.
the podcast side of it, where we were saying these teams that we expect to be terrible. Last year, the Houston Texans and the Green Bay Packers ended up being great investments, and that's kind of what I'm seeing with the Panthers. Is everybody is so out on them that these are guys you can pick up for dirt cheap towards the end of your draft. And what if all of these investments they made? We kind of glance over it a lot when we talk about fantasy football, but they made huge investments in the offensive line, both in the draft and in free agency. And that was the biggest problem last year. And when I watch Panthers games, I can't help but just go back to reverting to what I saw from Bryce Young in college, because I felt like last year you can't even get a read on what type of player he was. Like he wasn't even finishing his drop back before he would have defenders in his face. So I guess that's the question I have for you, Chris. As somebody who doesn't watch a lot of college tape, you're kind of looking at these guys with a very clean slate at the starts of their career. Did you see anything from Bryce Young where you say maybe this guy can figure it out and take a step going into next year? I know personally when I watch the Panthers, I can't get any read on what this team's identity was supposed to be last year.
Yeah, that's a good point. Mobility. Like you can definitely watch him. This almanac thing that I write in the summer, I give everybody film grades, and I watched a lot of Bryce Young film, and I gave him a B. I give him a C for everything else. But I give him a B for mobility. He's not like the best at it, but for sure, was running for his life a lot of the time, extended plays, sometimes did unbelievably stupid things as he was extending plays that I'm not going to blame on anything but himself. Like there are some unreal stupid plays on Bryce Young's rookie film, but it's NFL rookie film. It's hard. There are plenty of guys who've done dumb things in rookies and come back to be very good. So in light, Dave, the lens that you're using to look at this, I love that idea. I love the idea of saying, all right, how can I turn this around and say this is like negative hype on this offense to the point where can I find anyone I like at a price cheap enough where it doesn't matter, where they don't have to start for me on a fantasy team, where I can kind of just see and I can drop them in week 3 and it's not that painful. And I think it sounds like we would all agree that Diontae would be the one we would love to grab. Because ability wise, I mean, he's been Mr. Touchdown Snakebite. He's just been so unlucky through his career. I would love spend maybe like a top 40 receiver type pick on. I mean, let's say it's close to 40. I think I have him 36. And
I'll actually comment on that right now. He is the wide receiver 41 in ADP across all of the draft platforms right now,
you got a pretty good
around
feel
the
for the
8th
market,
round.
Chris. You can kind of feel where players are going without even looking.
I've been doing it a long time. Very old. Thanks for implying my age there, Dave. And then I think Thielen probably belongs in the top 50 even. Like I would take Adam Thielen in the blah blah round, the 10th round, 11th round, if it came around to it. I would take him because he has old man game. Like whatever he did last year shouldn't be any reason why he can't do it again. The reason that he wouldn't do it again, frankly, is that the Panthers wind up being a more functional offense with another quick possession receiver. But I don't mind these kinds of plays where you take the negative hype guys on the teams that nobody wants pieces of. Yeah, I'm with you there, David. You said that really well. I want to sign up for that.
And Chris, I know when we started the show, I said, "Hey, we want to be respectful of your time and get you out of here within an hour." You okay going a little bit longer?
Yeah,
Because
it's
we're
fine.
we're really peeling back the layers on some of these teams, and it's
Yeah,
making
I'm
for some good
I,
conversation.
I'm also yammer. All the comments are going to be like, "Could this guy stop talking ever?" Yeah.
I think that
All right.
wraps it up for the Panthers, though. Alfredo, we've talked
Yeah.
about this team a lot. It's just like this team. It's tough for me to get a read on because last year was just such a cluster, you know what? And then this year they've just changed everything. But I think everybody, the casual drafters, are so scared off that I'm willing to go back to the well and draft some Panthers this year.
Yeah. Zig while the people are zagging. I think there's some value to be had there. Let's go to our next team here. Another team, big overhaul, lots of rookies, lots of free agents. And I don't know how much value there is to be had in this team because there is some pretty significant hype, but it's the Chicago Bears. Same head coach, Matt Eberflus, offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron. Dave, I know, and you have repeated this many, many, many times, you absolutely love the rushing upside for Caleb Williams. You think this offense can be good. Last year, if I'm not mistaken, weren't they top 15 in scoring or something like that. So I mean, I think there's potential for this offense to be even better. Right now, they're somewhere in the middle of the league, but the running back spot, they've added DeAndre Swift. At the wide receiver spot, they add Keenan Allen and rookie Roma Dunze, who I think is incredibly talented. And then at tight end, they seem to keep adding starting caliber players there, getting Gerald Everett. So when I look at the team overall, I start to think, okay, the pass catchers in Chicago, it's more crowded than ever. It's very muddied. It's so hard to believe in a rookie quarterback that can get the ball to this many pass catchers, even despite us seeing it last year with CJ Stroud. So, Chris, I noticed you have one of the more higher rankings on Keenan Allen at wide receiver 18, which is so odd to say that's a high ranking for him because he's been so good for so long. And Dave and I were
He
both
was the
very
wide
much
receiver 2 last year.
yeah, like you and like we don't pat ourselves in the back all that often, Dave, but you and I were so in on Keenan Allen last year. We should have had a victory lap episode. That would have been great. But
he got hurt. That was the problem at the end.
Yeah. It's weird to see him at wide receiver
Yeah.
18 and say like you're so incredibly high on him. Is that just more of a reflection of saying Keenan Allen's really talented and he's still, air quotes, got it? Or do you actually believe that, hey, here's a rookie coming in, and even though we don't really expect too much out of rookies, he can go ahead and support multiple top end receivers like CJ Stroud did?
It's probably a little bit of both. I think I'm, again, always trying to err on the side of, okay, who are the players I know are good? I would like to have as many of those as possible. And let's assume as much situational neutrality as we possibly can. I'm going to try to make team situation mean as little as possible to me because we're terrible at predicting team situations before the season. We could all sit here right now and talk about the offenses that we're positive are going to be good and positive are going to be bad, and we're going to be wrong because the NFL reinvents itself every year, and we're always surprised. So in the case of the triumvirate receivers in Chicago, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, Odunze for me is going to suffer in my ranks because there's all of this knowledge and pent up goodwill about the abilities of Allen and Moore. And I don't know Odunze yet. I saw the national championship semifinal and final, and I recognize that he's a really good player in college. And all I know about how it goes is that almost always a very good prospect, a super top 10 type prospect, still needs time to adjust. And in this case, they have all the resources to let him be a, 5 target a game guy. If everybody's generational, then I think nobody's generational. We have very, very short generations in fantasy.
3 generational wide receivers in this draft alone.
That's right. And so I was aware of my Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen we refer to on my show as my eldest son. He also has old man game, so I'm not too worried about his age. And like you talk about the ultimate awesome security blanket for a new quarterback, like Keenan Allen just open right away. And especially, I mean, that's not just him about running like a great route against man coverage. It's just there's so much zone in the NFL, and he just knows where to sit. He knows where to walk right over there and sit down, and perfect timing for exactly when a young quarterback needs it. I've seen it very recently with a young quarterback with Keenan Allen work pretty well. So DJ Moore would be my first pick because he's a badass. He's just a baller. He's a freaking unreal player. Keenan Allen, I have been told by multiple sources how much higher I am on him than the market. And then Odunze, I'm probably going to wind up being lower because I'm lower on most highly drafted rookies.
I feel like I can't talk about the Bears without getting emotional, so maybe we can just move on to the next.
It's exciting though, right?
Well,
it is exciting.
It is. You know what else was exciting was Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky and Jay Cutler and
all right,
and Rex Grossman. I could keep going back and back.
Dave.
I mean, we've had a lot of exciting off seasons. Like this weekend, we had our Scott Fishbowl draft, and like I can't tell you how many people came up to me and they're just like, "How about it, man? Like, how excited are you as a Bears fan?" And I'm trying so hard to like stay level headed. And I'm just like, I'm not excited. I'll be excited when I see it on a field. Like when Caleb Williams has his first 400-yard, 5-touchdown game. Yeah, I'll be excited. But until I see it, I just refuse to sip the Kool-Aid. I mean, right now, like I have talked a lot about Caleb Williams' abilities as a rusher, which I think are a little bit understated. But I mean, like, where everybody's getting drafted right now, I have almost no Bears. Like the only Bears player that I want to draft is DJ Moore, because Chris, you said it. He's awesome. He can do everything. He could win deep. He could win short. He can make yards after the catch. He can pull contested catches. He can go across middle, outside. Like he can do it all. He's one of the best receivers in the league. So I like drafting him. But I think that everybody else is just so excited. I don't see a world where a rookie quarterback can come in. I mean, the only way this happens is if Caleb Williams is as good as CJ Stroud was last year. And that is setting the bar awfully high. Just investments in all of these guys, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift, Roma Dunze, are investments in Caleb Williams. And that's not a bet that I want to have to make 4 or 5 times in my draft by just doubling down on Bears players. I just want to take DJ Moore, the guy who I know is very, very good, has proven throughout his career that he is not situation dependent. He can win with any quarterback. DJ Moore's the guy that I'm comfortable taking. I'll take Keenan Allen if he is around, in the mid rounds. But this Bears offense, generally, I'm just out on, which I know sounds weird as somebody who should be an excited Bears fan.
But the thing I would say about that, how smart and instructive that is for people watching and listening, is that you should, we all should have our price on guys and not make that price be excitement based. Zeitgeist based, right? Like, square inches of column type in a newspaper based, we should make it, we should be ready to punt on the situations that we perceive or people are overvaluing. In this case, is it also Dave Kluge protecting the poor child that resides within? Yes. Clearly yes. But it's good advice even when you don't want to get your heart broken. It's good advice.
All right. Well, we got just a couple more teams here that we're going to take a look at. And as a Dolphins fan, I really don't want to talk about this team being better this year, but the New York Jets seem like they might be better. Robert Saleh comes back. Nathaniel Hackett comes back. Aaron Rodgers allegedly comes back as the starting quarterback here. And it seems like they got themselves a nice little insurance policy with Tyrod Taylor being the backup. But there's a ton of excitement and hype for Breece Hall, and I think deservedly so. Good player. Garrett Wilson is the other guy. Tons of hype. Good player. They've added a couple wide receivers. Mike Williams coming off injury. Malachi Corley, the self-proclaimed yak god in the NFL draft. And then it's that time of year where people are getting really excited about Tyler Conklin. And I don't understand that, but
because it's the off season, and that's when Tyler Conklin looks the best.
I mean, what are we doing? But anyways, the question about this team is really this. We see an older guy. I told you we were going to talk about more olds. We see an older guy in the NFL, quarterback, coming off of an Achilles injury. He's not a huge fan of modern medicine, but I'm not going to dive into that. But could he actually return to maybe not MVP form, but the form he was in 2021, where the Packers were top 10 in points scored? And do the Jets need him to be that guy for Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson to be good fantasy players? Does Aaron Rodgers have to be the best version of Aaron Rodgers, or can he be this sort of modified, watered down version of Rodgers? And that's really all it takes for Wilson and Hall to be good fantasy players.
That's so well phrased. And the answer is he can absolutely be the watered down version of himself. And those guys can still be great because they're really great players. I'm not worried. I'm not worried about either one. I mean, again, I'm not looking at market, but like Breece Hall is the 2 or the 3 in every fantasy draft, as far as I'm concerned. Yep. He's special player. And I saw him do it with Zach Wilson at quarterback last year and a lot of other guys too. Like I'm not worried about it at all as far as he goes. And then, yeah, Garrett Wilson's terrific. You know, he's fast. He's smart. He's runs really good routes. I'd love to see the hands be a little better, but they were good last year. Like good, really good player. Yeah, I mean, it's. I think this is a great topic because it's easy for me to go, don't worry about it. Garrett Wilson, wide receiver 14 or whatever. And then you think back to last year when he got nothing at quarterback and he didn't finish in the top 30 and he got so much volume and he still couldn't finish in the top 30 because no one could throw him the ball. It's real easy for me to go, don't worry about Aaron Rodgers. It's just that I assume the baseline state of watered down Aaron Rodgers is still so much better than what the Jets had last year that even some frustration and empty target totals and all that stuff that Garrett Wilson had to struggle under last year, if there's some of that, there won't be nearly as much of it. There'll be much more good stuff. So I think I'm in on both those guys.
Yeah, and we talk so much about like age curves and when we expect players to start declining, whatever that may be. But I think when you're looking at guys like Aaron Rodgers, you can just throw all of that logic and historical data out the window because that's what these guys do. Like the best of the best, like one of the best players of all time, he's going to defy the odds. He already has defied the odds playing at this point in his career. And we saw Tom Brady, in his 40s, still consistently throwing for over 4,000 yards at a 5,300 yard season at age 44 years old. It wouldn't surprise me one bit if Aaron Rodgers can still do that. But I think Chris said it best, and you said it best, Alfredo. Like, even if it is a watered down version, like Aaron Rodgers at 70% is still a much better quarterback than anything we saw from the Jets last year. So this is another offense that I'm trying to invest heavily in. Not too concerned about the other pieces, like Mike Williams coming off the ACL. That worries me a little bit because we know how Aaron Rodgers is developing chemistry and he's not going to have any preseason with him. They're just going to throw him into the field middle of the season. Get a little worried about that. Tyler Conklin, a guy that I'm not getting excited about at all, but it is Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. I think you can just, like, if you want to map out where all of the touches are going to go in the Jets next year, you can assume that over 50% of the touches are going to end up in either Garrett Wilson's hand or Breece Hall's hand. And they're both very talented players. So it's as simple as that. They're young, they're talented, and they have somebody here who can facilitate a semblance of an offense better than we saw last year.
It's very weird to see how much the Jets and Falcons offenses kind of resemble each other. A good young wide receiver that's supposed to get a lot of targets, a really good running back that's supposed to catch a lot of passes, and then 2 elite tight ends that just haven't reached their potential yet.
Kyle Pitts and Tyler Conklin.
Yeah, Conklin, he's trying. He's an old too, isn't he?
He is. He's been around for a long time, but man,
for NFL purposes, not for the earth. Yeah. All right. The last team I want to take a look at here, and we sort of teased this. We started the show with Arthur Smith's old team, and we're going into his new team that he's with. And we're jumping to the Pittsburgh Steelers, where Mike Tomlin, the forever 500 coach, he's always got this team winning enough games to be in the playoff hunt, but never actually quite that good. Arthur Smith comes in. We're hoping he can make the offense better, back like how when he was the offensive coordinator for the Titans, like I mentioned before. Russell Wilson comes in as the new starting quarterback for now, I would assume. Justin Fields gets brought in as well. Same running back room with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. The wide receiver room is pretty bare. You've got George Pickens there. They draft Roman Wilson, Senior Bowl darling out of Michigan. And then you got a lot of names of guys that you're just like, oh, they play football. Okay. And you're not really sure what they're going to do this season. So I know we hate Arthur Smith. He ruined fantasy football. He ruined our lives, but like he's actually.
Don't forget to comment. Arthur Smith is a good coach in the replies below.
Yeah. And so I was actually going to say, like, he's not a bad offensive coordinator. No. And I don't think this is the thing too, is it kind of the same way that I asked about like Aaron Rodgers. Could he just be a watered down version of himself and the team is still better? It's really hard for the Steelers to not be better than they were last season with that combo of Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky and then Matt Canada calling plays. So the combo of Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson, or Arthur Smith and Justin Fields, should be somewhat better. And for me, the player that stands out right now is with decent fantasy potential is George Pickens. The splits for him when he was getting passes from a quarterback that was not Kenny Pickett or when Diontae Johnson wasn't on the field were pretty good. So do you see that same type of potential? I know we talked about drafting for ceiling last week and players with high upside, but Chris, do you see that same potential for a guy like George Pickens, or could we see him end up getting sort of nerfed the way that Drake London did in the Arthur Smith offense last season in Atlanta?
But the thing is, it's funny that you say that he was nerfed because the metrics people love him because he got so many targets. So it seems to me like if you do the one-to-one thing and say Arthur Smith is terrible, all he does is run and throw to one guy, then the players we care about,
probably good for Pickens.
Get taken care of. Here's the problem that I have with the Steelers. It comes down to Russell Wilson last year was really awful. He was awful. The numbers don't describe how bad it was to watch those Broncos games. I think Bronco fans know how bad it was. I play a Tiki Barber sound drop on my show of he couldn't help himself in the middle. He was announcing one of the early season games. He couldn't help himself. He exasperatedly said, Russell Wilson's afraid. And that's absolutely what Russell Wilson, not physically afraid of getting hit, but of making a mistake, of throwing interceptions. Everything was a check down. It drove Sean Payton crazy. And probably it'll drive Mike Tomlin less crazy because Mike Tomlin's kind of old school and just doesn't want you to turn the ball over. And I don't think Russ is going to turn the ball over. I also don't think he's going to make George Pickens a super elite player. And then George Pickens himself has the problem of maybe being an absolute knucklehead and doing one thing amazingly well, which is getting himself in insane body positions and somehow catching passes in the end zone or on the sideline or whatever. But the reason he gets in those positions is because he's one of the worst trackers of the ball to come into the league with any hype in a really long time. He just doesn't even seem to see it until the last minute. And then he goes, "What?" And he, look what I can do. So I'm again, I'll take anybody at the right price. Pickens deserves to be among the top 40 receivers, I think, because he's athletically really good. I mean, he can be the Cortland Sutton who made a bunch of crazy catches because finally, as the Broncos were losing games, Russell Wilson said, I guess I better fling it up there. And Sutton made crazy catches. And so maybe Pickens could. So he'll be a high variance player in the top 40 receivers. I think the story is going to be way, way less about Arthur Smith than more about Russ.
Yeah. And I think with George Pickens, analytically, people can't stand him. Like you said, he's a terrible separator. His inability to draw targets raises so many red flags in his analytical profile. You talk about some of the concerns on film as well with his ability to track deep balls. And Jeff Bell and I, we had this discussion where we talked about George Pickens. We just did a divisional series where we kind of looked at every single division, broke down every team. We were talking for about 5 minutes. And then finally, Jeff Bell just said, at the end of the day, though, George Pickens is a dog. And I want dogs on my team. This guy can score from anywhere on the field. All they need to do is get him a little screen or a slant, and he can just beat one defender, and then it's off to the races, and nobody can catch him. So I think there's something to be said for a guy like George Pickens in that respect, that he could give you week-winning upside on any given week, because there are a few guys that can score multiple 80-plus yard touchdowns in a game, but that's kind of what you're betting on with George Pickens, because I don't think that he is the guy who's going to be separating and getting wide open and ever drawing 10, 11, 12 targets per game. He's the guy that you're hoping can take one of his few touches and rip off a big play or score a touchdown. And there's a place to be had for a guy like that if you can use him as a wide receiver 3 or a flex, and you can live with the up and down, the boomer or bust abilities. But he's not a guy that I'm clamoring for to draft as your wide receiver 2 and have to rely on every single week. Right. He's kind of a guy that I'm hoping slides a little bit in drafts, so you can plug him in at the end of your lineup and live with that variance.
So to bring it back to the topic, Alfredo's please, can you guys just talk about the topic? Are the Steelers bad enough in an offensive environment, a scary enough offensive environment for us to be finding great value on these guys the way we would like to? We would love to find the nadir, the guys. We're not talking about the Patriots today, folks, but can we find someone, where they're so cheap? And I think probably the issue with Pickens is that he probably won't wind up being that cheap because he's a big name and he's well known for doing the stuff that Dave just described. And so he's not a round 10 guy probably, and so it's going to be, I mean, to be honest, I know I don't look at ADP right now, but I know what the market's doing on the running backs. I know they're valuing Najee Harris more than Jaylen Warren. I know it because you know how, because I had eyeballs from the last couple of years when they were doing that wrongly. I have them ranked side by side, and so to be honest, I think if we get if we get the quote unquote unexpected situation where, on topic here, the Steelers are expected to be terrible and actually wind up being pretty good on offense, Jaylen Warren's going to be the superstar for fantasy. He's going to be the one who came the cheapest, and he's a better player than Najee Harris. I have them ranked side by side. Did I already say that? But anyway, I've ranked side by side. I think Najee is what he is. There's a lot of like pixie dust and tinsel on him still from him being a first round pick, and he just is not that player. And Jaylen Warren is not only faster and more elusive and a better receiver and more exciting. I think he's got almost as much power. He's smaller, but he is a handful. He's potentially an injury concern because he throws himself around. But like, if there's an underrating overall because it's Arthur Smith and it's the Steelers and they're so boring, then I bet you the way I'll take advantage the most is Jaylen Warren.
Yeah, and I've also got him back to back in my rankings, and I actually have the slight preference to Jaylen Warren, and I've already done some early season drafts, and it's really fun when I watch somebody take Najee Harris, and then 2 rounds later I can get Jaylen Warren, who I think is, like you said, the better running back. Like, whether film, analytics, whatever you want to look at, the only argument you can make for Najee Harris ahead of Jaylen Warren is draft capital. And with both of these guys 3+ years into their career, I think it's time to throw that out the window. Like, this is, we saw last year that Arthur Smith wants to get the ball in his best playmaker's hands, and I think Jay Warren is just a better playmaker. So I'm excited about Jaylen Warren as well. Willing to throw some darts on George Pickens. I do have some concerns though about Russ Wilson because he did not look like the same player last year in Denver than we saw all of those years. I don't know if it was just a bad scheme fit and Russ just couldn't really figure out Sean Payton's offense, or if Russ Wilson just reverted and kind of forgot how to play football. I think that he plays his best when he can get a little bit off script and kind of do his own thing. So I don't know if Mike Tomlin's going to give him a little bit more flexibility rather than, when you hit that back foot, just immediately get the ball out and find an open receiver. Because I think he does his best when he can kind of get outside of the pocket and make some plays on the fly. But as you get older and you lose some athleticism, that gets harder and harder to rely on. So I'm not extremely excited about the Steelers offense, but like we kind of said with the Jets, can't get much worse than Zach Wilson. And I don't know if you can get much worse than Kenny Pickett either.
Yeah. Wilson would have more of an argument if he'd only been in Denver for 1 year with the same offensive coordinator twice. And I would say that there is, I mean, the Hackett offense and the Sean Payton offense are cousins. Like, there's a lot of similarity there, but I mean, now we can look, I was just dead freaking wrong about Russell Wilson going to Denver. I thought it was a crowning move, and so did they. But if we now, with the benefit of hindsight, look back on those last Seattle year or so, or maybe 2 out of the last 3 years, again, another different offensive system, again, cousins, but like, I don't think so terminology different. I don't think so conceptually different. Frankly, I don't know that, and there are that many offenses that don't now incorporate a lot of the stuff that Wilson used to do great. Like, that's what we want out of quarterbacks, and he's not doing it anymore. Like, right. He is hesitant to throw the ball in the middle of the field. Anything beyond like the 3-yard dump off, he is just hesitant, and he's never been a tight window guy. No, never been. But like, somehow made it work all those years when he wasn't a tight window guy, and now it feels like, as we all age, as we all become olds, we all become caricatures of ourselves. Our biggest warts begin to grow, and it feels like, that's maybe what we're seeing out of Wilson.
Well, if that trend continues with Russell Wilson, all I hear is even better news for Jaylen Warren, the guy who's going to be catching those little 3-yard dump offs. So, hey, give me even more Jaylen Warren.
Yep. Well, guys, we did it. We made our way through some of the more improved offenses here in the NFL. And listen, before you jump in the comments and say, how could you leave out this team? Guys, there's an argument that every single team is improved. Like, come on. We get it. We wanted to talk about... Yeah, exactly. But we just wanted to talk about some of the more nebulous situations on these teams and who are the better values here. And with that being said, a big thank you to our special guest today, Chris Harris. Please make sure, if for some reason you listen or watch us and not him, please go check out the Harris Football Podcast. It's been around for a long time. It's an award-winning show. And Chris, you're just fantastic. So thank you for joining us today.
Oh, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun.
Well, that's it for us today. For myself, for Dave Kluge, we want to thank you guys for watching and listening all the way through. As always, make sure you're subscribed to the Football Guys Daily News Updates that you get from Joe Bryant. It's got everything that you need to win your fantasy football leagues, and it gets sent straight to your email inbox every single day by Joe Bryant himself. For Dave, for myself, for Chris, we'll see you next time. Adios.